The world is an upheaval, and that has to do with the lack of equal distribution of wealth. There's always poverty. Poverty is still the problem of the world. There's only one problem on this planet, it's called poverty. Before, now, and tomorrow. Now, I'm not here to be a prophet. I'm only telling you what I've seen and I experienced in my life, past, present, and future. The first Palmieri appeared in, as far as my family is concerned, genealogy, in the year 1000 in Italy. Middle 1800s, two brothers left Corsica. One ship got lost in the high seas and landed in South America, which I met a Palmieri there in Peru, and the other one landed in Puerto Rico. I have the documents, the papers, everything, of my great-grandfather, His name was Domingo, Sunday. When he died, the story goes, he left each of the daughters approximately $200,000 in gold. They all went back to Europe. My grandfather stood, his name was also Domingo. And he takes a servant of the Palmieris, which was my grandmother, she was black, and gave us 7 children. That's where my father comes from. Then he marries white, and now my grandmother starts to cook for them. And my mother would tell her, did you ever think of putting a little poison in their food? That was my mother who made my brother and I pianists, 5 feet. She arrived in New York in 1925. Then my father came on in the next year. My brother's born in 1927. And I tell everybody I was born in 1898, I was born 9 years later. And my mother's the one that put us on the piano. My brother was already professional, the best pianist that I've ever heard, and still is. He was started professionally at 14. And then I started studying at 8 years old. But my problem was that I loved to play timbales. Tito Puente was the idol there for all the young kids. So I played 3 years timbales with my uncle, El Chino y su alma tropical. I was banging everything around the house. And my grandfather says, you better get him some, everything is dented. So they got me the timbales, and then superiority of women, my mother bought a metal case that weighed more than 2 or 3 pairs of timbales. And she would wait, come on, Eddie, let's go do the gig. And I pick up this case. And that's when she would let me know. Edward, don't you see how beautiful your brother looks when he goes to work? He doesn't have to carry an instrument. When will you learn? I'm learning, Mom. And sure enough, I made a deal with my uncle, a deal that he couldn't refuse. And I went back to the piano, and because of my mother, and I'm still there. I was born on 112th Street, 60 East 112th Street, which is now known as the Charlie Palmieri Way. But by 5 years old, we moved to the Bronx. We moved to 830 Kelly Street, between Longwood and Intervale. That became quite incredible because eventually my father, who was a radio and television repair man, and my grandmother and my mother and my grandfather opened up a luncheonette called El Mambo, right on the corner of Kelly Street and Longwood. And it ran for about 3 years or something, and I was like the soda jerk, and making egg cream and sell you cigarettes 3 for 5 cents or 4 for 5 cents. And then we brought it down to 3 for 5 cents. And the high direct cookies like the Oreos, but they were 100 a penny each. They were great cooks. So the people would come for lunch, and with the candy store and the luncheonette together. And I handled the jukebox. Where we lived it was mostly Puerto Rican, and then the bottom half of the block was Afro-American. Life was all about stickball. Get up in the morning, the guys play stickball in the playground or in the street every day, even in the winter months. It was stickball. A lot of great musicians came out of there. Manuel Cando, that played with Tito Puente, and then Perfecta, and then he made his own orchestra, Libre, It was a wonderful, wonderful time because the music was the best that we ever heard. It'll never come back. That era, and it was on commercial radio. While we played stickball, we're listening to Machito, Tito Puente, Tito Rodriguez, constantly all day long on commercial radio. That doesn't exist anymore. My first exposure to music was my brother playing. And I used to record with him, play claves, He would take me for the recordings, and I met musicians with him. And then eventually, when I started back on the piano, he would recommend me to the different orchestras. And then we would go to the union, and that's where you found work on Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays in the union hall, like in the Roseland floor, for example. And then you're looking for I'm looking for a Saturday. I need a piano player for Saturday. That's how you got your gigs. The recordings he was doing with Tito Puente, my brother's recordings that he did was certainly my influence. Then he took me to the Palmieri when I was 15 years old, and I saw him playing with Tito Puente in the bands, and that's when I first spotted my future wife. She was 15, had come from church, and she loved the music. She was from the West Side. Remember that the Palladium was right next to the Birdland, and the greatest jazz players were there. Little by little, I went back to the piano and readjusted my whole comprehension of the instrument. My greatest teacher was at 11 years old. Her name was Miss Margaret Barnes. She was a classical teacher, and I studied in Carnegie Hall, the building, because they used to rent the studios upstairs, certain teachers. My brother was her pupil, and then my brother recommended me. She was a concert pianist also. My mother wanted us to be musicians. That was something that she had in her heart. Her effort to see her two sons, become, musicians, artists, it worked for her, and we just loved her so much for doing that, and she was so proud of us. I started professionally in 1955 when I worked Cutch's Country Club in the Catskills with a quintet. My brother recommended me to them, and then my brother recommended me in 1956 to Vicentico Valdes, Cuban singer, and he sang with Tito Puente in the 50s, made his own band in 1954. I joined his band in 1956, and that's Manny Oquendo is playing bongo, and Tommy Lopez is playing conga, and Mikey Collazo. Eventually, the three of them played with me when I started my band in the 60s. My musical structures came all from Cuba, and I learned through Manny Oquendo. Brought me about 25 78s when I was with Vicentico Valdes in 1956, and I studied them religiously. And the piano players, and that one famous called Lili Martinez is my mentor in Cuba. There was another one called Jesus Lopez. There was plenty of them. Lino Fria, with different bands. Pepe Delgado. There was Peluchin. There were just so many. And they were all excellent. And the structure never ceased to excite you in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. And that what blew me away.
You played with Tito Rodriguez.
From 58 to 60.
What was that like? I mean, he was...
Oh, and we were on the road. We drove to Vegas. We drove first to Fort Worth, Houston, and San Antonio. Then we drove to Miami in 1959. I was there when Fidel Castro was coming in. The picture of The Godfather, we were all in Miami then. And I thought, wow, now it's my chance to go to Cuba. Forget about it. I still haven't been to Cuba. But Cuba is in my heart as the structure of the Cuban music. It's my life. Tito Rodriguez and I, we lived together in Miami, the whole band, and these apartments, and then we were working in the Balmoral. Tito Rodriguez, though, when he started to get dressed, he went from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde, and he was an immaculate dresser. I learned a lot with him, and I loved him very much. The way he handled his band, his magnetism on stage, his insistence on the best musicians, his insistence on the best arrangers. He was no chopped liver now, and I used him as a role model. Late 61, I started La Perfecta, and that's when I met Barry Rogers. And I asked him, look, I play in this place called the Tritons, and that's how it started. And then from there, I started the band with one flute, a wooden flute, George Castro, Barry Rogers, one trombone, Mike Collazo, who was started, a gentleman, Chicky Perez, Joe Rivera. That's how it started. Then eventually, Michael Yasser goes with Tito Rodriguez, and Manny Oquendo comes with me. And then it's history. La Perfecta was the only orchestra coming out of New York City that changed absolutely everything that existed till then in Latin music. No band ever had done what we did. No band ever had two trombone players up front. It was 8 men that you didn't know who to look at. You could see it, hear it, and you won't believe it. And the power that it generated, and then we just didn't stop. Each composition was 8, 10 minutes. We broke the market when it came to the recording. We started recording, and when I did Azúcar, you know, everything was supposed to be 2 minutes and 45 seconds. And I told the A&R man, Mr. Teddy Reeg, who was the manager of Count Basie, Teddy, this is not going to be the norm. You know, the number was already quite popular in the Palladium, in the street before the Palladium, because I got to the Palladium about 1963. He said, Eddie, man, just record it. 8 minutes and 30 seconds, 8:30, which was where I lived, 8:30 in the Bronx. All the pawn shops got rid of the trombones because of La Perfecta. We were known as the orchestra with the roaring elephants, the trombones. Nothing like La Perfecta. It had the jazz influence of chordal structures, mostly because of Barry. We used to do the work together. I would write the composition and then we arrange it together. And he showed me another level of how to write for trombones so we could cut through. It was one of the most incredible exchanges between Barry Rogers. Barry Rogers was a genius. If God is perfection, I said in his memoriam, Barry Rogers was near perfection. Unreal. He was Jewish, but that meant nothing. I mean, he played with all the blacks, you know, up in the Bronx. He was the one that taught me how to drive as far as foreign cars, the Volkswagen. He was a mechanic, and once his Volkswagen fell apart, I said, wow, you got another one? He said, yeah, but I got the other engine up in the closet. You just couldn't believe the things that he did. Plus, he's the first one that brought me the sound system to the Palladium and rigged it up on the bylines with a Bogan, flare speakers, and if anything went wrong and you kicked the wire and it broke, it was no problem. He had a portable soldering iron, solder it. I couldn't see him, but I could see the smoke coming out of the bandstand. And he tuned my pianos because they were so bad shape, so he would tune the piano. Nobody played like him. Yeah. He taught himself. That's why he had that sound. You know, everything was like J.J. Johnson, Kate Whitney, which is beautiful, you know. But that ain't the deal, you know. We're bashing, and Barry's like, wow, you know. And Jose Rodriguez became the second. That he was Brazilian, and Barry met him in a recording studio. He said, Eddie, I found our second trombone. We tried others, but this was the one, Jose Rodriguez. That was the greatest combination of two trombones there's ever. I became interested in social justice because the great teaching of Mr. Bob Bianco. He used to teach also in the Henry George School, one of the greatest books written, Progress and Poverty. I started to write compositions like Justice, La Libertad, Lógico. That was in Venezuela. There was a gentleman called Francisco Luna. He was a very elegant newspaper reporter. And I asked him, Francisco, who would be the son or the daughter of justice? And he said, La Libertad, Lógico. It's logical. It's got to be liberty. Anything I would hear would be a stimuli to me to write. And then, vámonos pa'l monte, let's go to the mountain. We can't live under these conditions. Then I did a number called Conditions That Exist, Condiciones que Existen. Doesn't let us, you know, live. My introduction to the Young Lords was my dear friend Mickey Melendez, which is my compai. Matter of fact, when they put the flag around the Statue of Liberty, I'm the one that did a benefit to bail them out. Those were the turbulent years of the 60s in New York City while La Perfecta was doing its thing, you know. So in all that combination, these recordings came out, you know. Why are we having these upheavals? Why is in the conditions that we live in? It's all poverty. It's only one answer. But everybody, the Black Panthers went one way, the Weathermen went another way, and the Young Lords were right down the middle with Pablo Guzman and Felipe Luciano. Geraldo Herrera was their attorney. So sincerely, they believed they were helping. The most incredible part about it is that once you fight, at that time, we called it the establishment. They all had to do time, and when they came back, they had to join the establishment. There's no way out, no way in. You know, you got to come. It's status quo, and Yoruba Guzman became a great reporter for CBS. Juan Gonzalez, a great writer for the Daily News. Mickey Melendez, an activist and a disc jockey. And Felipe Luciano is, in my opinion, is a genius in his own right, you know, that his awareness and everything that he's done. And now he became a reverend. So we certainly wish him the very, very best. So they believed, and I embraced that belief because they were friends. This is not fair weather friends. I'm there to help with my music, and they love my band, and they love my music and me, and so it was a great exchange. It was a cultural exchange for the better. All that led to Harlem River Drive. When I met Calvin Clash, Calvin Clash was the writer of Seeds of Life, Broken Home, and the theme of Harlem River Drive. And those three compositions were monsters. When I saw them, that's how we started. Then Ronnie Cuba, the great baritone player, brought me the band of Aretha Franklin, Cornell Dupree, and Bernard Purdie, and then we started rehearsing, and then we recorded for Morris Levy, and he allowed me to go on roulette. And unfortunately, it didn't do what we wanted it to do as far as sales were concerned. I met Calvin Clash in Philadelphia, and then little by little, we had a friendship, and then I saw that he could write, and he wrote beautiful, lyrics. He lived it. Everything he's written, he lived it. Broken Home. One day I live home, and my mother, in a home that she called the cage. Son, I'm so sorry, but you're gonna have to make it on your own. When he showed me these lyrics later, I said, wow, Calvin, I didn't know you. His name was Snooky. Snooky, I didn't know you wrote, oh, beautiful, let me see these. And then I put it to music. And with Ronnie Cuba, who was the orchestrator for me, and we rehearsed together, and then we started to record. We got Jimmy Norman, from the Commodores, and then the rest is history. And Marilyn Hersher, she wrote Idle Hands, and Jimmy Norman wrote If I was the butcher shop, I agreed. I wanted to cross over. That wasn't anything different. I wanted to cross over and, get some dough. If this is what's happening, let's go in another thing. And that's why I asked Morris Levy, put me on roulette. What came out was one of the greatest albums, 50 albums that ever were recorded in New York City. It meant going out of the city on the G-Dub, and there's a reason why it was called Harlem River Drive. I would like the city eventually to acknowledge that I recorded Harlem River Drive, my opinion, and I'd like to put a toll booth on it, charge $1, 50 cents, a quarter to the community, a quarter to the hospital, Lebanon Hospital, a quarter for my brother, and a quarter for me. And my brother died, and he told me I could keep his quarter. So I'll make 50 cents on it.
I think
and I'll call it the Eddie Palmieri City Turnpike. All right. As you pay your toll, the $1, it's only $1, you're going to hear Harlem River Drive. These lyrics are a standard of what the problem is. We're going to record it. And the best musicians in the world to do that music, what more can we ask for? I always sold a certain amount of records that you could only sell in my genre. Remember, as far as I'm concerned, I'm blessed that I was born here, but I'm in the wrong country for my music. This is country western, this is Mex-Tex, this is rock and roll, this is rhythm and blues, jazz, And we're a little portion there, of Latin music. I said, listen, well, let's try. Let's go. Let's try crossover. That was the word crossover, And what did I do? I excited the weathermen, and the next thing I know, the CIA and FBI came to see Morris Levy, and he told me, Mr. Palmieri, I don't need the CIA and the FBI to come here for something that I didn't do. Is that clear, Mr. Palmieri? Clear the bell, boys.
Why not record a pop album if you wanted a crossover?
Because I'm not a pop artist. What I play, no one can do. And I could brag on Tuesdays, okay? Because that's how complicated it is. The Latin rhythmical patterns are the most exciting and most complicated in the world.
Why do you think the album still feels so fresh and relevant?
Because it's the past, present, and future. We're still in the same problem. Poverty. That'll always exist. I recorded in Sing Sing because I had my friend Calvin Clash there. He died in Sing Sing. Calvin was a dear friend, but Calvin was always in jail because of grand larceny. And I went with the A&R man, Joe Kane. He said, Eddie, it's 80% black. I said, open up the curtain, man. What are you telling me about color? And we blew the place away, man.
What do you think about what you're seeing today? You have a candidate like Trump.
Oh, you see, to me, any politician is a loyal servant. And he's not a politician, he's a billionaire. But is still under the thing of a loyal servant once he comes to the political machinery. The reason is we don't know what we want, but they certainly know what they want. When you're talking about the Senate, the Congress, they know what they want. That's why they're all millionaires.
What about the song Everything is Everything?
Oh, I sang that, and I told George Gordon, he said, Eddie, why don't you sing it? I said, look, George, I want to put it this way. If I sing it, I'm liable to kill you. I sang it, and George Gordon died. That's why I don't sing anymore. But everything is everything because, they about justice, which meant that everything is not everything. You tell an Indian, or you tell a black man, or you tell a Mexican, about justice, what, they're going to look at you and grin. You're totally out of your mind. Again, the only problem is, one, poverty. As long as we have that, we're going to have the same conditions and worse on this planet. Guaranteed. So we got to know exactly what we mean when we say land, labor, wealth, rent, interest, capital, transportation. Man puts his hand to land. Land is the essence of life. Man cannot create a grain of land. He can move it. He can make dikes. He can do and build it, but nobody could create land. So land is the essence of life. When you put labor to it, there comes wealth. And that labor, you have to use capital. And then from that labor, you have rent. And you keep interest. And that's the wonderful wealth machine. When the Indians saw the white man put up a fort, as far as the Indian was concerned, that fort is yours. Not the land that is on it. The land belongs to God and to all of us.